I've been playing Marksman Rogue and I'm trying to figure out every build. I basically just don't want to play Twisting Blades, but I want to still play Rogue. So I'm trying out every single Marksman skill to find the best way for this. And right now, Barber is taking Season 1 by storm. It's everywhere. Everyone's playing it. But what if you want to take it one step further than just not wanting to play TB? What if you also don't want to use the Barber? Well, let me introduce to you Barrage. Barrage is built around ricochets, hitting targets and sending multiple arrows flying across the screen, applying all your imbues. However, Enhanced Barrage means you have to damage a vulnerable enemy or critically strike an enemy. Two things that cannot be done if the target is immune, which is what happens when you apply the Barber effect. So Barrage actually just cannot use the Barber. So in this video, we're going to talk about Barrage. We're going to combine it with the Vile Apothecary Wrathful Heart. We've also got some interesting tech using a fairly underutilized aspect, Icy Alchemist, but we'll talk more about that later in the video. The gameplay you're currently seeing is a tier 59 Nightmare Dungeon, which is 16 levels in excess of my characters. But we're going to talk first about the legendary aspects. A lot of this may look somewhat familiar if you've watched my rapid fire guide, but there are some very key changes that allow us to play to Barrage's strengths. On the helmet, we have the aspect of Might. As we are combo point based, we do use our basic skill very frequently, so gaining 20% damage reduction at all times is very nice. On the chest, well, we're no longer using the Barber, so Umbrus allows us to gain Dark Shrouds when we crit and lucky hit a target. Very nice. We're going to get up to 40% additional damage reduction from this aspect. Very strong. On the gloves, we have Accelerating to gain up to 25% increased attack speed whenever our core skill critically strikes. The legs, very standard for defense. We're using Disobedience. This gives us up to 30% additional armor. This combination of affixes on the helm, chest, and legs should be very familiar. Three very powerful rogue defensive aspects. For the boots, we're using a unique pair of Penittent Greaves. This is very important, as you'll see later on. Chilling enemies is crucial for this build to function, and you'll see that we also deal up to 10% additional damage to those chilled enemies. For the weapon, I am using the aspect of Branching Volleys, which causes our barrage to split more. It means we've got more opportunities to proc all of our lucky hit effects. It also just means we get to apply chill and our shadow imbue to more targets. So I like it on the weapon. I may consider moving this in the future though. For the neck, we're using Edge Masters. This gives us up to 30% additional damage based on our primary resource. A very strong aspect, basically in all combo point builds. And then for the first ring, we have Corruption. All imbuement skills gain 40% increased potency. So this is going to mean that you're freezing enemies far more frequently because of Cold Imbue. That potency, that chill effect is going to go up, and it's going to make it much easier to freeze enemies so that you can get more damage from your enhanced Cold Imbue. Now this is where it gets interesting. Icy Alchemists is a lucky hit based aspect that means when you damage a chilled or frozen enemy with a shadow imbued skill, it has up to a 75% chance to release an explosion. Now this is almost certainly bugged, and you can actually proc this with Puncture. So as of right now, if you're against bugs, don't do this. If you're all for it, basically what happens is your builder skill is now much more valuable because your Puncture will count as being shadow imbued. So when you hit these frozen targets or you've chilled them with your boots, you will be able to apply this effect very frequently. And you can see from the gameplay, all those blue circles, those blue explosions when I'm building my combo points are from this aspect. Very strong. For the offhand weapon, we're using the aspect of the Expectant. This is a crucial aspect for almost all combo point builds. It increases the damage of our next core skill every single time we use a basic skill up to 3 times, which synergizes perfectly, of course, with combo point builds, as 3 is the maximum you can build to. And then I'm using Condemnation. There is some argument for swapping this out and doing some creative stuff with defensive aspects. Maybe you could get aspects of the Cheat on your chest and put Umbrus on your neck and drop the Condemnation. Haven't tried that yet. Maybe if you want to go more defensive, that is the route you want to go down. I'll provide an extra sheet on the builder of what that looks like in my mind. I haven't yet tried it. Let's move on to the skill tree. I'm going to go over all the passives here. You can also find the link in the description if you don't want to see this part of the video, but I am going to talk about some of the choices I've made and why. So first of all, Puncture, very standard in almost all rogue builds as it's a very fast attacking skill, and we can of course build vulnerable very easily. Then of course we're using Barrage. Goes without saying it's a Barrage build. Enhanced Barrage, as mentioned previously, is why we cannot use the Barber. We have to hit vulnerable enemies or critically strike them. Then Advanced Barrage means that whenever a single cast of Barrage ricochets at least 4 times, we gain a ton of crit, 20% flat crit. So you're going to be having very high crit rates on this build. Next, I'm actually taking Sturdy and Siphoning Strikes. Because of how many ricochets you're going to get, how many arrows are going to be flying out, I genuinely think Siphoning Strikes good on this build. And we can also build a ton of lucky hit without investing that much onto it on our gear. We get 18% from Barrage, and then we can get more later on in the skill tree and Puncture can, of course, lucky hit as well very frequently, so we're going to be gaining a lot of HP back. In terms of Unstoppable, we're using Shadow Step. We don't quite have room on our gear to fit in a second charge of Shadow Step, and for that reason, we're actually using Discipline Shadow Step. This basically means we get a 3-second reduction in its cooldown, and it's going to be up much more frequently to get you out of those tricky situations. Then Weapon Mastery, standard, ton of damage, 30% increased critical strike damage. Our crit's so high on this build, this is amazing. Then we come down and grab Agile. Using a cooldown increases your dodge chance by 12%. Just 12% chance to not get hit by something, and obviously the build is entirely based around cooldowns with imbues, poison trap, all that kind of stuff. So just a constant 12% dodge chance, very nice, very defensive. Dark Shroud, we're going to be proccing with Umbrus, and we can actually grab even more critical strike chance from countering Dark Shroud. Poison Trap is a very nice tool that allows us to get an opportunity to reset the cooldowns on our imbuements. But other than that, it also knocks down enemies. This provides an opportunity for you to play more aggressively. You can shadow step into a pack of enemies, drop a poison trap. They're all going to get knocked down, and by the time they're going to stand back up, they're going to be dead or they're going to be frozen. So Poison Trap, very strong in this build. It also acts as an activator for our Trickery Malignant Heart, which is going to summon a Taunt. So we're very safe going into large packs of enemies and just dropping a Poison Trap. Then Exploit and Malice, very standard. For the imbues, we're using Shadow for that AoE, for that coverage, to get those big explosions and kill large packs of enemies. Cold Imbue, this entire build focuses, you've seen from Icy Alchemist, you want to be chilling, and we can come down and grab Mixed Cold Imbuement to deal 20% damage to crowd-controlled enemies, but then 40% to frozen enemies, which is going to be happening very often because of Icy Alchemist. And then Frigid Finesse, we get a nice damage bump again to chilled or frozen enemies. Now the ultimate, we don't actually take an ultimate, but we have come up and grab Alchemist Fortune, because almost all the time we're going to be imbuing our skills, or maybe you've got a proc of Vile Apothecary. This lucky hit chance is going to be real nice. It's going to massively increase your chance of healing. It's going to almost double your lucky hit chance, so you're going to get more healing back from siphoning strikes. You're going to be proccing Icy Alchemist more often. Lucky hit, very nice. Also, Innovation, just a chance to grab back some energy. Barrage does sap your energy a bit more, so Innovation is going to be a nice way to keep that up. If you are finding your energy to be a bit low, you would take points out of Agile, and you could put them straight into Innovation, and you should be absolutely fine with this. Then Adrenaline Rush and Haste. Movement speed, attack speed when we're on low energy. Also, some additional energy regeneration, very nice. And then finally, Precision, just for increased critical strike damage. So we have a ton of crit chance, crit damage, we're incredibly defensive, we're freezing everything, everything's knocked down, and we've got a nice amount of healing from siphoning strikes, which makes for a very comfortable build. Lastly, let's discuss the Paragon board. We are starting out with the Control Glyph. If you're a bit lower level, maybe 80 or below, you don't quite have a lot of points yet, you can absolutely put your critical strike damage glyph here, which is Combat, I believe it's called. You can place this in this socket instead, but later on, swap it out for Control. It's just going to be a better placement overall. Moving into the Cunning Stratagem tree, we have our Vulnerable Glyph, Exploit. Grab that. You also get a nice amount of armor, core skill. You're going to get all the benefit from these nodes as the stat requirements are very low. And then moving into Exploit Weakness, we can actually take this node because we're not using the Barber, so we can get that 15% more multiplier to our damage against vulnerable targets. And then this is where we end up putting the Combat Glyph later on. So 87.1% additional critical strike damage. Fantastic placement for that. And now here you may be tempted to go left. Do not go north. Grab Eldritch Bounty. And in this socket goes Infusion. Now, if you have Penitent Greaves from this point, you can move over and grab Cheap Shot. What this is going to do is give you 25% more damage, assuming there are 5 crowd-controlled enemies around you, which is going to be very frequently. However, if you don't have Penitent Greaves yet, just come on down here and get your Ranger Glyph socketed and grab some additional armor and a bit of damage to Elise, as well as this amazing cluster of points down here. 15 crit damage and an additional 22.5, so a lot of crit damage in this little cluster down here. So this is a very nice board to come into. I almost forgot again like I did last time, but the hearts that I'm currently using are the Vile Apothecary. You can see it on my amulet here. I'm using the Brutal Heart that suppresses 20% of the damage that I take. And then Trickery is the final one that I'm using. I need to find a replacement one for this ring. I just realized while recording this, I didn't have the right one in the whole time. But yeah, I want you Trickery. There are some arguments to use the critical strike damage one on this one because we have such a high crit chance. I also might try out the Malignant Pact. I'll report back to you guys any findings I get whilst using those two things. But this build right now is serving me very well. It's been very strong, and I hope you have a blast if you go out and try it. Remember to like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.